So the pending task is in our GUI we have to cover some controls. So we'll be covering tree and let's say table. So in swings, so this I'll be showing so that you can actually understand events again and the control handling with these two controls. And then we go in Java. So initially what we'll do is we'll actually take up with networking first. So this is something which is actually very important to know before learning any other server technology concept. So in networking or networking in Java, right, we basically learn different protocols which we have. So when we say protocols, like it can be a communication protocol which is like HTTPS or what exactly is HTTPS or HTTP and on, and then messaging protocol which is like we normally say XML or right. So these are some protocols which we have. So basically these protocols and different terms like what is socket, what is TCP/IP, what is UDP, how communication is done in this, how server technology actually works, on what protocol HTTP work, what networking protocol HTTPS works, all these things. So we'll actually learn in networking, and basically we'll see the socket programming too. So the basic socket programming, how we can actually do it in Java. The basic socket programming to actually push the data and read the data from server and client. We'll try to create a server client program in Java, and we'll see how to actually communicate back with each other, right? So in this socket programming, we'll actually learn both TCP/IP and UDP programming. So which are important to learn, because sometimes, most of the times, right, if you're actually running through a secure channel of creating applications, right, mostly you'll be working on TCP/IP itself. If you're working on HTTPS protocol, even then, which means you are actually working on TCP/IP. And if you're working something on data which will be just pulled up in a router and you don't need any acknowledgement and all, right, then it will be UDP. We'll actually talk more about these two, and we'll see how these two works in actually real time, basically. Right. So that is something which will be our networking, where we'll actually learn how things work over the network and all. So once you are comfortable with networking, then we'll actually move on with the servlets part. So servlets will be the main topic, because if you can understand servlet, the complete server technology can be in one hand. So because even JSPs are built on servlets, which is servlets plus some HTML part will be your JSP. Basically, servlets is server-side scripting. For every web application to run, right, we actually need a web server and a web script which runs on the web server to actually render the pages to client. So in Java, we have servlets for that. And there are so many web servers which we have in market. So for our training, we'll be actually running the complete Tomcat setup, and administration of Tomcat. I'll actually give you the complete view on how we can actually use Tomcat and all. Because one good thing in Java is that you can actually download everything and you don't have to install. Directly copy the setup and run. Right? That is something which is very handy in Java. So even in Tomcat, it will be the same. So we'll be just downloading Tomcat, and so I'll show you what are the main configurations which we have to do on Tomcat so that we can actually work on this. So this will actually learn as a part of servlets, because this Tomcat will be our main server configuration for both servlets and JSPs too. We'll be learning both on Tomcat itself. Right. So that will be the main configuration of web server. Maybe we can take it as a web server or the web server. There are many web servers in market, like we have Tomcat, we have WebSphere, we have JBoss, right? We have WebLogic of IBM's. There are so many, but working model will be same, but the configurations can be different, right? So so here we'll be checking out the configurations and complete admin part of Tomcat, basically how we can actually maintain this now. So in Servlet, there is something which is server-side scripting. So initially, before actually understanding servlets, right? I mean, before and actually getting into deep dive of servlets. So first we'll actually learn what is a server-side script. So even before servlets, there were even now people are using CGI server script, which is Common Gateway Interface. So this is the most old and mostly used one before actually some server-side scripts came. So in Java we have servlets, and in .NET you have something called ASP, which is active server page. So this is something which is a server scripting of .NET, which works on IIS. And CGI is something which works across different web servers, but there is some disadvantage and some performance issues with CGI. So which actually gives an option to go for servlets in case of Java, and to ASP in case of .NET. So these things are something that you don't have to write anything to actually make it as a script at server side. Right? If you're using technology, right? If you're using technology and if you're building something on Java, right, on JVM, which means you are by default using servlets when you actually set up on Tomcat. So we'll see all these things when we actually start up with servlets. Right? So once you are comfortable with this, so once you learn, okay, what exactly is a script part, which actually helps us to write web applications, right? Then we'll actually start with the concepts of servlet. So in order to go into the servlets, right, we will actually learn the fundamentals of servlets. Basically, how main thing what we have to understand is what is a web container and a web server. Anyways, we will understand the web server as Tomcat, and we have to understand how web container is actually created on web server, because this web container is nothing but a bunch of servlet data used to render. So this will actually understand, and then basically we'll understand the servlet fundamentals basically, and all HTTP methods, which is very important again. So the life cycle of any page which actually gets rendered in JSP. It's very important to understand the life cycle of page, both life cycle methods and the events, life cycle events being triggered on rendering of one JSP. Now when I say life cycle, which means the point when you actually give URL and just say browse, right? So it actually, the request goes to server, comes back to your browser page, and from that point on, right? So what are the different methods being called to actually render the page, and what are the different events being triggered while rendering the page. So this is something which is very important. So if you can understand these things, right, which means you can handle any part of page at any life cycle point you want. So that will actually come up with Servlet life cycle and the architecture part. And we'll see one more very important thing, which is web.xml. So this is something which you'll actually get, we normally call this as configuration file, or sometimes we also call it as deployment descriptor. So this is something which will be there in every technology. So in Java it's web.xml. If you take in .NET, it will be either web.config or it will be app.config or thing. But basically it should be web.config, which actually defines how to. So these configuration files are mainly works as an interface between your web server, right, and your web application project which you have. It actually gives all the rules which web server can actually follow to access your project, web application project. That is something which is web.xml, or we normally call deployment descriptor file. So this will actually come as a part of the project itself, or if not, we can actually create one, which you can actually, the naming convention will be same, which will be web, web, and XML. So this is the nomenclature which our project can understand, and even the web servers can understand. So this is something which we'll be learning, and all the Servlet major of Servlet configurations, or we normally call it as initialization parameters, context parameters, right? Everything will actually we will be defining in web.xml itself, and Servlets or Java will give us a direct option to read all the configurations through some Servlet tokens. Right? We'll see what exactly are there. And even the welcome file. Like whenever you actually browse on some website, right? Take an example of Facebook.com, right, or Gmail.com or anything. It will actually route you to direct login page, right? If you're not logged in, right? Or if you're logged in, it will directly take you to the inbox, right? Which means there will be one startup page which you have to mention, right, whenever your main domain URL is called. So that is something which we normally call it as a startup page or welcome file. So even that will be defining in web.xml, right? So that's why it's very important to actually have to understand configuration file. And then we'll actually see different session managements like HTTP session, cookie, URL rewriting, what is request dispatcher, what is session, servlet context, what is servlet configs, right? And once we are comfortable with this, then we'll actually go for filters. Filters is again a very important concept in Servlets, which actually acts as a firewall. Firewall in the sense, I'm not talking about the actual firewall at hardware level or the operating system level which will be created, but this is something which is a simple firewall to your Servlet, right? Because Servlet is something which is heavy thread will be created for each and every request. So that is something which we have to avoid. So if it is a bad request, then we should actually avoid entering into Servlet. So in order to do that, we have got something called filters. So even filters, we can actually create filters and tag it to Servlets directly from web.xml itself. So this will be the starting point of entry for any Servlet to enter from filter. We'll see practically how it normally works and what are in which areas we can actually use filters. to act as a firewall. So this will be the main coverage of subjects, which will actually cover everything on subjects. And basically we'll also see query string part. Anyways, this will actually come up as a will actually come when you actually do some collaboration of subjects. One subject calling one subject from another subject, right? Calling a HTML page from one subject. All these things anyways we'll be doing as part of coding. And we'll see how to create a query string. Query string is something I hope which you have seen. Anyways, we'll understand the URL part too, which is let's say we normally give something called, let's say www. You have google.com, and let's say you have search. Let's see, something is equal to, let's say you have searched for tree, right? So this is something which is your URL. So in which this will give you a complete domain path. And let's say you are actually you have got some more internal URL folders. Let's say this is something which is search, your app, and something, right? So this will give you a main domain path, and this will actually give you something which is the actual page path. So which you can take, let's say it's app.jsp and your query string, which means in this domain you have got this folder in which you have this page, and to this page you are actually passing a query string called this. Now how to read this, how we can actually render these type of pages, now we'll see. So this is something which you normally watch out while browsing, and we'll see how to come up with query strings while collaborating. Mainly this can happen when you want to collaborate with either servlet to JSP, JSP to servlet, servlet to servlet, JSP to JSP, or JSP or servlet with HTML, right? All this during collaboration you may encounter with the query string part. We'll see this part both in servlets and JSPs too. Right? And then so this will actually cover the complete servlet part. So once you are actually done with servlets, which means you would have created one complete project actually. Now which means you are ready with a web application and you want to deploy it. Now this is something which is very important. Deploying part is something, let's say you have developed a website and you want to deploy on some web server. Now when we are learning Tomcat, right, we'll actually learn two different types of deployments. Now when it comes to deployment, so this is the first will be using Tomcat in your Eclipse, because unless you have a server setup with your Eclipse, right, you will never be able to develop any of the web application. It's very important because you can't just write some code and directly deploy on production, right? You have to test it. I mean, while developing that, you need a server setup to run it, check the page and everything. So we'll see how to set up Tomcat with Eclipse. We'll see the complete configuration part of setting up Tomcat with Eclipse. And second way is the main deployment, like which is Tomcat will be somewhere else and you have to take a project and then deploy. So this is something which will actually like we normally say live deployment, right? We'll see how to take a project and deploy. So normally in this situation, right, so we will be creating a WAR file, right? So WAR is which is web archive we normally call. We create a WAR file and we normally deploy this WAR file on Tomcat. When we say deploying WAR file and Tomcat and other web servers, right, they can understand some archived files. So we normally deploy things in archive way in Java, in case of Java, right? But in case of some other technologies, like take an example of .NET, right? It actually gets published as a folder publish, which is we take a publish, zip it up, transport or FTP to the FTP, secure FTP to any server where we actually need, right? And then unzip it and give the folder path to the web server in case of I. So that's how it works. So here in case of Java, when you give web archive or EAR, enterprise archive, so server will unzip it and will create a folder structure inside that. I'll show you all these things, whatever I'm spelling out, when we actually enter into practical part, right? And when it unzips it, right, it will be placed in one of the web app containers of Tomcat, and from there it will actually render the pages to the clients. So that's how the deployment works, and this deployment will be common for both topics of servlets and even JSPs too, because both are like, you are actually creating some web application out of servlets and JSPs. Now, so this will actually give you a complete picture on servlets and the deployment part. How by this topic itself, we will understand how web application works. Basically, how the complete life cycle of web application works through servlets. Okay. So once servlets is done, then we'll actually jump into JSPs, which we call it as Java Server Pages. So this is the only protocol which we have, or only extension we have for pages in JSPs normally. So we can actually say that JSP is like a servlet with provided UI HTML part in it. Like, which means in servlet case, right, you can actually design a page in servlets. So without actually having a single JSP, you can actually create a complete website on server itself. But the only problem is that UI part, which is HTML part, you have to write everything as a string. I'll show you that part. So in order to get rid of that, right, you have your JSP. So this will actually give you a HTML editor where you can actually design your complete UI, and whatever part is to be communicated to the server, right, you can actually have the servlet part. So you can actually say JSP is a combination of your servlets, and you have your HTML editor part on JSP. Right. So you can have, which means JSP internally will be converted to servlet, and servlet internally will be loaded on your JRE to get the output object to the client. We'll see that part when we actually come to the main JSP architecture again. So again, this is something which is very important. We have to understand how JSP works, which is life cycle of a page, right? Before rendering the complete page, how it normally works. So which means if you can understand the architecture, right, you will understand how it actually works, and it will actually give you a strong hold on developing JSPs. So once we done with architecture, right, then we can actually enter into the main codes of JSP, because we will already have an idea on Tomcat, right, which is a web server. So again, while understanding JSP, again I'll actually give you an overview on Tomcat again, because we have to integrate Tomcat again with Eclipse. Now again, when I say integrating Tomcat with Eclipse, right, you are actually doing a project wise, right? It doesn't mean that if you give Tomcat path to Eclipse once, you can use it for any number of web applications. So that is not the case. If you are creating a website one and you gave a Tomcat instance to that, which means it will actually create an internal instance of that project only. Let's say you have created servlets one project, and you gave a Tomcat reference, right? Which means you gave reference to one project. Now, when we start JSP, I'll be creating, let's say, some other project, right? Which means even to that project, I have to set up Tomcat. Until unless I set up Tomcat, right, I won't be able to develop any. Not not that I won't be able to develop, but it will be tough to develop an application, because in order to run an application and see how it is working, you need a Tomcat setup. Unless you provide a web server, right, there won't be any chance of creating a web container. So if you are not given an option to create a web container, obviously you won't be able to run your other application part, right? So that's how our web server will help us. And once we are done with the setup of web server in Eclipse, so then we can actually go to deep dive of JSPs. So basically we have a few very important topics in JSPs. So mainly we'll actually start with implicit objects, which is normally called JSP implicit objects, which is which are in every JSP development, right? You will be using any one of the object which we normally call implicit objects. So it's like few things whenever a JSP starts, right? Few objects will be already instantiated by JVM for you. Like an example, like let's say take an example of exception handling, right? So exception will already be instantiated for you, which you can actually directly use in it. That is something which we call implicit object. Anyways, we'll see all types of implicit objects being used in JSPs. We'll cover everything. So once you are done, then one more very important thing, which is directives. So we normally call either directives, or sometimes some people call it as directive tags. You can call it either way. So this directive is something which is a common term. It can be JSPs or ASPX in .NET or PHP, whatever, right? The directives will be there. So this is something which is used to drive your web page. So we'll actually see there are different directives, like page directive, right? Include directive and all. We'll see all the directives which we have in JSPs. That will actually cover the directives part. So once you are comfortable with implicit objects and directives, right, you can actually start your JSP project now, right? And even here we'll actually see the session management part too. We'll see HTTP save. We'll actually learn session management in Servlets so that it actually covers the JSPs too, which is like HTTP cookies, cookies, HTTP session, right, URL rewriting, right, all these session managements will actually learn in Server itself. And if time permits, we will also actually do that part in JSPs too. Because even if you write it on JSP, again the working model will be same, and how we write will again be the same. That's how it works. So in here we'll also start with something called scripted. So anyways, this will actually come up as a custom action scripting part, which means